The following presentation is brought to you by Discovery Channel School, a leading provider of quality educational resources that help teachers bring the world to their students.
Europe lies in the northern hemisphere, and it is the second smallest continent. The only continent smaller is Australia. Asia, the largest continent, and Europe occupy the same landmass. The Ural Mountains form the boundary between the two. Russia, the largest country in the world, spans both continents. Europe is bordered by water: the Arctic Ocean to the north, the Atlantic Ocean to the west, and the Mediterranean, Black, and Caspian Seas to the south. Europe also includes many islands, including the British Isles and Iceland. Despite its small size, Europe is more densely populated than any continent except Asia. Most European countries are highly urbanized, and some of the world's most historic cities are found here. London, England, Paris, France, Rome, Italy, Berlin, Germany, Athens, Greece, and Moscow, Russia, to name a few. Humans have populated Europe for tens of thousands of years because it has a largely favorable geography. About a third of the continent is arable, or good for farming, a much higher percentage than on most other continents. And its northern forests offer ample timber resources. The climate is generally mild, in part because the warm Gulf Stream current flows from the Gulf of Mexico and along Europe's western coast. Large rivers course through the continent, providing important channels for transportation and trade. These rivers include the Danube, the Rhine, the Elbe, the Rhone, and Europe's longest river, the Volga. Europe has relatively low elevations, except for the Alpine mountain system that runs west to east. These mountains, the Carpathians, Balkans, Alps, and Pyrenees, form a natural barrier between northern and southern Europe. Northern Europe is cooler, wetter, and more heavily forested than the south. Scandinavia and northern Russia, both reaching above the Arctic Circle, have large stretches of permanently frozen subsoil called tundra. The south, sheltered from northern winds by the mountains, is drier and warmer. The Mediterranean region has a warm subtropical climate. The continent is commonly divided between Eastern and Western Europe. Many of the countries in Eastern Europe, along with Russia, were once part of the Soviet Union. Russia is almost twice as large in area as the United States or China, stretching 4,800 miles along the Arctic Circle from Europe to the Pacific Ocean. It forms the entire northern border of Asia. While most of Russia's land area lies east of the Ural Mountains in Asia, most Russian people live on the European side. That's because Asian Russia, or Siberia, is one of the least hospitable places on Earth, with its long, severe winters and recorded temperatures of 90 degrees below zero Fahrenheit. South of the Arctic deserts and frozen tundra are vast, swampy flatlands called the taiga, which is also the world's largest forest zone. The taiga is a belt of mostly coniferous, or needle-bearing, evergreen trees, which begins in Scandinavia and covers much of Siberia. The taiga is the primary source of Europe's timber. Unlike most of Europe, Russia is rich in mineral resources, especially oil, coal, natural gas, and iron. But rugged terrain, bitter climate, and great distances, especially in Siberia, have presented huge obstacles to collecting these resources. Much of Europe boasts fertile farmland and temperate climates. In addition, it also possesses great natural beauty thanks to its spectacular coasts and mountains. It is easy to see why this region has attracted people for thousands of years.
Most of Western Europe is a peninsula surrounded by the Arctic and Atlantic Oceans, the North Sea, and the Mediterranean Sea. The Western European peninsula is composed of the countries Portugal, Spain, France, Belgium, Luxembourg, the Netherlands, Denmark, Germany, Switzerland, Italy, Austria, Liechtenstein, Finland, Sweden, and Norway. The United Kingdom, Ireland, and Iceland are also Western European countries, even though they are separate from the peninsula's landmass. Greece is also part of Western Europe, even though it lies at the tip of the Balkan Peninsula. Greece has more than 2,000 islands, and it's bordered by the Ionian Sea, the Mediterranean Sea, and the Aegean Sea. Its capital city is Athens. Athens is considered the birthplace of Western civilization. Standing watch over Athens is the Acropolis. Pericles, a statesman in ancient Athens, was instructed by an oracle to transform the Acropolis into a city of temples. Oracles were priestesses believed to communicate the wishes of the Greek gods. The Acropolis became a showcase of colossal gilded buildings and huge bronze and marble statues. Now in ruins, the grandeur of these structures is still awe-inspiring. At the top of the Acropolis is the Parthenon. Completed in 432 BC, it is the largest Doric temple in Greece. Except for its wooden roof, it was built entirely of marble. Dedicated to the goddess Athena, the Parthenon housed a giant statue of her. Though the contributions of ancient Greece are well known, Athens remains on the world stage. As the capital of Greece and a center of Western European culture, Athens hosted the 2004 Olympic Games. The Netherlands, also known as Holland, is located in northwestern Europe. It is bordered by the North Sea to the north and west, Germany to the east, and Belgium to the south. The 16 million people who live in the Netherlands speak Dutch and Frisian. Belgium is bordered by Luxembourg to the southeast and France to the west and southwest. Belgium is one of the smallest countries in Europe, just about the size of the state of Maryland. Once part of the Netherlands, Belgium won its independence in 1830. Now it is one of Europe's most urbanized and densely populated nations. Belgium is home to over 10 million people who speak primarily Dutch and French. Twice the area of New Jersey, the Netherlands has 280 miles of coastline. This coastal expanse and its major rivers, including the Rhine, encouraged international trade and exploration throughout Dutch history. The city of Amsterdam is the capital of the Netherlands. In addition to being a major port and a center of the diamond cutting industry, Amsterdam is an artistic and historic center of Europe. Ethnically diverse, Amsterdam is home to more than 40 canals, which are flanked by streets and crossed by 400 bridges. Residents, visitors, and tourists alike travel its waterways in salon boats. Many old and picturesque houses line the canals. This one, on the Prinsengracht, is now a museum. But it was once the home of Anne Frank and her family. As Jews, the Franks hid inside during the Nazi occupation of the Netherlands during World War II. The family stayed in a secret annex from 1942 until August 4th, 1944, when the Nazis discovered them. Anne Frank's diary of her family's 2 years of hiding is a classic of literature. Most of the city's Jewish residents disappeared into Nazi concentration camps. Amsterdam is well known for political and social activism. So the city that is more than 700 years old is a living museum and a thriving modern metropolis.
Spain and Portugal make up the Iberian Peninsula, the region in the extreme southwest of Europe. Slightly more than twice the area of Oregon, Spain is bordered by the Atlantic Ocean to the northwest and the Bay of Biscay to the north, France to the northeast, Gibraltar to the south, the Mediterranean Sea to the south and southeast, and Portugal on the west. The Canary Islands, the Balearic Islands, and Ceuta and Melilla also are part of Spain. Spain's capital, Madrid, is located in the center of the country, which is home to more than 40 million people. Portugal is just smaller than the state of Indiana. The country is home to over 10 million people, most of whom speak Portuguese. Lisbon, Portugal's capital, is located on the westernmost point of continental Europe. Lisbon is a beautiful natural harbor. The city has a history extending back 2,000 years. During the 15th and 16th centuries, Portugal experienced a golden era of sea exploration, building Europe's first maritime empire by establishing colonies around the world. Lisbon was transformed into the opulent capital of a vast global empire. In 1755, a massive earthquake reduced the city to rubble. But some of its castles and former splendor are visible today. Every June, the streets of Lisbon burst alive with feasts in honor of popular saints. The Feast of St. Anthony, the patron saint of lovers, is a religious but fun-filled celebration. The night before the feast, celebrants enjoy a costume parade. Multicolored paper lanterns, streamers, and banners line the parade route. Bonfires glow and food is abundant. Grilled sardines are part of a popular meal. On the day of the feast, many couples marry. Traditionally, Town Hall sponsors the weddings of poor couples and provides a reception for them. Lisbon is a city that easily mixes past and present. So today, the heart of Portugal is one of Europe's most fascinating cities. Switzerland is located in Central Europe. It is bordered by France to the west, Germany to the north, Austria and Liechtenstein to the east, and Italy to the south. Switzerland is a small country, just a little larger than the state of West Virginia. Its physical geography is dominated by the Alps and Jura Mountains. Bern, the capital, is located in the west-central region. The primary language in Bern is German, but most Swiss people speak other languages, including French, Italian, and English. They also speak the language of chocolate. Chocolate starts with the beans of the cacao tree. South American Indians first used the beans to make a bitter drink. Conquering Spaniards tried the drink, sweetened it with cinnamon and vanilla, and introduced it to Europe. François-Louis Callier, opened a chocolate factory in Switzerland in 1819 and produced the first bar of chocolate. His factory is still in use today. In 1876, Daniel Peter, a Swiss candle maker and entrepreneur, and baby food manufacturer Henri Nestlé invented milk chocolate, used today in most candy bars. The Swiss eat more chocolate per person than anyone else in the world. On average, 27 pounds a year. But the Swiss also export their chocolate to the rest of the world, making it an important part of their economy, in addition to its important place in Swiss history.
Although France is less than twice the size of Colorado, it is one of the largest countries in Western Europe. It is bordered by Spain, Switzerland, Italy, Germany, and Belgium. The Atlantic Ocean, the Mediterranean Sea, and the English Channel are also on the French border. For more than 300 years, the power of the French king was absolute. This meant that he had the power to do anything. By the summer of 1789, the French people were ready for change. The people demanded equal rights and more power to govern themselves. But when the king refused to grant equal rights to all French people, he and his family were imprisoned in their own palace, and a representative government made up of French citizens called the National Constituent Assembly began running the country in his place. Without a king, multiple governments and factions were able to seize power. One of the people who rose to power during these turbulent times was a man named Napoleon Bonaparte.
Nous sommes ici.
Napoleon fought many battles for the new French government and was able to add more than 23,813 square kilometers to French territory in only 1 year. He finally returned to lead the French people in a revolt against their new government on September 4th, 1797, and became leader of France on November 9th, 1799. As leader, Napoleon kept Paris the center of France's government. He also created the Bank of France and the Napoleonic Code, the first modern set of laws in France made without a king. Napoleon wanted to rule all of Europe and beyond. His first step was to make himself Emperor of France on December 2nd, 1804. Next, he would lead an army of 600,000 soldiers into Eastern Europe and destroy anyone who stood in his way. In June 1812, the army started marching toward Russia. The French emperor planned to add Russia to his empire. But the winter months were harsh in Russia, and the Russians set fire to Moscow, Russia's capital, so that Napoleon would have nothing to conquer. With no protection from the cold and nothing for the soldiers to eat, Napoleon's troops were forced to retreat back to France. The distance from Moscow to France was so great that only 10,000 out of Napoleon's 600,000 soldiers survived. The survivors had become so weak that they could not defend France from its powerful enemies. Great Britain, Prussia, Sweden, and Austria were able to invade Paris on March 31st, 1814. The leaders of these countries forced Napoleon to give up the French throne. They sent him to the tiny island of Elba in the Mediterranean Sea forever. Napoleon was beaten, but not defeated. He and his followers escaped from Elba and returned to France on March 20th, 1815. In a matter of months, he rebuilt the French army and became an emperor for the second time. But the leaders of Great Britain, Russia, Prussia, and Austria did not want to give Napoleon another chance to conquer Europe. These four nations joined forces, and in June 1815, they beat Napoleon's army at Waterloo in the modern-day country of Belgium. In his second time on the throne of France, Napoleon only ruled for 100 days. On June 22, 1815, the Allies forced Napoleon to give up the French throne for good and sent him to the island of St. Helena in the South Atlantic Ocean for the rest of his life. The French Revolution enabled Napoleon to hold more power than anyone else living in the 18th and 19th centuries. He reformed French law and built an empire. But instead of spreading the revolution's message of liberty and equality, he tried to control the destinies of other countries and rule their people. For that, his life ended in exile.
The Federal Republic of Germany is in the center of Europe and is bordered by the Netherlands, Belgium, Luxembourg, France, Switzerland, Austria, the Czech Republic, Poland, Denmark, the Baltic Sea, and the North Sea. Although Germany is slightly smaller than the state of Montana, it has a larger economy and more people than any other nation in the European Union. Berlin is the capital city of Germany. Today, it's a major cultural center and a modern industrialized city. But less than 2 decades ago, Berlin and the entire country were divided between East and West. After its defeat at the end of World War II in 1945, Germany was split into East and West Germany. The United States, the United Kingdom, and France controlled West Germany. The communist forces of the Soviet Union controlled East Germany. The former Nazi capital of Berlin, located in East Germany, was also divided. The Western powers got West Berlin, the Soviets got East Berlin. After the war, the Western powers sent a lot of money and equipment to West Berlin, and it prospered. West Berlin turned into a rich island city inside East Germany. But the rest of communist East Germany was poor, and its people had harder lives than their West German neighbors. Frustrated, millions of East Germans defected to West Berlin in search of a better life. To stop these defections, where people leave one country to live in another, East Germany made traveling to the West illegal. And they built the Berlin Wall in August 1961 to keep the rest of the East Germans from leaving. Their city had been cut in two. In the early days, there were still a few weak points in the wall.
East Berliners who have apartments facing the border take the long chance when they get orders to leave their homes for the interior. While an East German guard attempts to yank her back to prison, West Berliners pull her to a fire net and freedom.
The East Germans soon blocked and demolished homes and buildings along the border. The East and West built up troops on opposite sides of the wall, and it became one of the front lines in the Cold War between the capitalist democracies of the West and the communist countries of the Eastern Bloc. The wall stood for the next 30 years. Thousands of East Germans managed to get past the wall over that time. But thousands were also caught and imprisoned. And hundreds were killed trying to escape East Germany. the wall finally came down in 1989. East Germany's Communist Party was thrown out of power following months of anti-government protests. Since the wall came down, Germany has tried to bring Eastern productivity and wages up to Western standards. There are still many things dividing the East and West German people, differences in lifestyle, in wealth, and political beliefs. But now that the Berlin Wall is gone, one of the biggest obstacles dividing them is gone too. And a reunited city of Berlin is once again the capital of a reunited Germany.
The United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland is located on the British Isles off the northwest coast of France. The UK is part of the European Union and is made up of the island of Great Britain, which includes England, Wales, and Scotland, and the northern 1/6 of the island of Ireland.
The capital city of Great Britain is London, England. London is the largest city in the entire UK. Today, London is a sprawling metropolis with about 6.5 million people. But London has been a big city for centuries. 200 years ago, there were already over 1 million people living here. To heat their homes and fuel their factories, they burned coal. This burning coal released tons of ash, soot, and sulfur into the air. The smoke from the coal mixed with London's natural fog and created a thick gray smog that could hang over the city for days. Locals called it London fog. The smog even made its way into the literature of the day. In his 1853 novel Bleak House, Charles Dickens wrote about an unhealthy fog he called a London particular, or characteristic of London. The London fog could get so bad that it actually killed people. In 1952, a 4-day smog killed over 4,000 Londoners. In part to get away from the smog, and with the introduction of affordable mass transit, many people moved to the outskirts of London. But as more people moved to the city's edge, it turned into a huge suburb, the residential area around a city. For the English, the country estate was their dream home. But most people couldn't afford to buy manor houses in the countryside, so they moved to the ever-expanding suburbs. Although the builders used efficient, modern materials like concrete, they built the houses based on designs from periods that were high points in English history. The Tudor style of the mid-16th century featured houses that combined bricks with timber. Their triangular roofs, bay windows, and great halls were like those in traditional manor houses. The Elizabethan style of the late 16th century added more living areas, wider staircases, and bigger bedrooms, all meant to emphasize comfort. And the Queen Anne Revival style of the late 19th century emphasized protection with its steep roofs and towers. And its tall chimneys, originally meant to stop sparks from setting fire to thatched roofs, expressed warmth and safety. These traditional styles reassured the suburban residents and were reminders of England's glory days. Some even claim that they helped people feel more secure during the Great Depression and the World Wars. The coal fogs that plagued London for hundreds of years are now a thing of the past. But for many people, the desire to escape the city into the suburbs is still going strong. Around the 8th century BC, the Peloponnesus region in southern Greece was invaded by soldiers from the north. These invaders established a new city, Sparta, and their neighbors soon came to fear them. Sparta's warriors were so fierce, the city didn't need walls for protection. Other nations wanted Peloponnesus, a fertile valley sheltered by mountains. The threat of invasion from the Persian Empire and others was constant. Forever under the cloud of war, Sparta was an armed camp. Soldiers were the ruling class. At birth, a boy's strength and health were assessed. Those deemed weak were abandoned in the mountains. Those judged fit were taken from their mothers at age 7 to begin military training. At 20, he was made a soldier and joined a platoon. At 30, he could marry, as long as he remained devoted to affairs of state and the art of war. He could not farm or trade. These jobs were left to the slave class, known as helots, and lesser citizens, called freemen. At 60, a soldier finally retired, and a younger man took his place in the platoon. Sparta's single-minded devotion to war produced an army that could out-drill, out-march, and out-fight anyone. By the 6th century BC, Sparta was the dominant city in Greece on the strength of its brute force alone. Spartans fought in small, mobile platoons of fewer than 24 men. In battle, a Spartan warrior armored his torso with a bronze breastplate called a cuirass. His shins were also guarded by bronze. Strapped to his chest was an iron sword with a curved blade. A crested bronze helmet that exposed only his eyes protected his head. As an army, the Spartans used a new fighting strategy called a phalanx. Their phalanx was a massive formation of soldiers protected with shields. The right side of each man was protected by the shield of the man to his left. Sparta produced soldiers who could endure any hardship and confront death without fear. The term Spartan became synonymous with self-discipline and self-restraint. But centuries of fighting took their toll on Sparta. Costly wars with Persia, Athens, and Thebes eventually weakened the city. In the 4th century BC, Philip II of Macedon, father to Alexander the Great, conquered the region as part of his campaign to become master of Greece. By the 2nd century BC, Sparta was nothing more than a Roman province.
Italy is on a boot-shaped peninsula in southern Europe along the Mediterranean Sea. It's bordered by France, Slovenia, Austria, and Switzerland, and the Ligurian, Tyrrhenian, Ionian, and Adriatic seas. Italy also surrounds the independent state of Vatican City and the tiny republic of San Marino. The city of Rome is in the middle of Italy. Rome is Italy's capital and its largest city. Rome is an ancient city and one of the great symbols of European civilization. From its humble beginnings as a collection of farms along the banks of the Tiber River, the city of Rome grew into one of the world's greatest empires. Rome's golden age was over 2,000 years ago. In 27 BC, Augustus Caesar, the nephew of Julius Caesar, came to power and brought with him the Pax Romana, or Roman peace. The Pax Romana was a 200-year period where Rome wasn't at war with anyone. The Roman Empire thrived during this time and grew as large as it would ever be. It covered an area stretching from modern-day Scotland all the way to modern-day Syria and Armenia. Roman legions protected trade routes on newly built roads, and the Roman fleet ruled the seas. Grain, gold, exotic animals, and other riches flooded into Rome from the foreign lands it had conquered, and Roman citizens moved freely throughout the empire, spreading the Latin language, a common Roman coinage, and their Roman architecture and culture. Ancient Rome was a city of over 1 million people. That number of people living in one place was unheard of at that time. Roman technology helped the city grow that large. An ingenious system of aqueducts brought fresh water to Rome's people. And a complex sanitation system kept the streets clean and limited the spread of disease, a serious problem in other cities back then. They even had police and fire brigades patrolling the streets. The Romans enjoyed a busy cultural life. Temples, theaters, baths, roads, and public spaces spread throughout the empire. But one of the most important places for the average Roman was the arena. And the greatest one was the Colosseum. To keep the people happy, the emperor held spectacular contests there. Some of the contests were battles between gladiators, who were usually trained slaves or prisoners. Other events had men fighting against wild animals shipped to Rome from throughout the empire. The arena could be flooded for sea battles. The games reflected the ideals of the Roman people. The gladiators displayed Roman courage and military strength. The exotic animals showed how far the empire reached. The games proved that Rome and the emperor controlled not only the lives of people, but nature itself. When Rome finally fell to the Goths in AD 476, it took over 1,200 years for another society to reach the level of technical sophistication and luxury of the Romans. Final proof, perhaps, of Rome's ultimate success.
The Kingdom of Sweden is located in northern Europe on the eastern part of the Scandinavian peninsula. Sweden borders Norway, Finland, the Gulf of Bothnia, and the Baltic Sea, and is slightly larger than California. 2/3 of Sweden's land is mountainous. Because of this, most of Sweden's nearly 9 million people live in the low-lying southern third of the country. Stockholm is the largest city in Sweden. It's also the home of the national government. Although Sweden was a military power during the 17th century, it hasn't participated in a war in almost 200 years. This long period of peace has allowed Sweden to spend less on its military and more on helping the country and its people prosper. Sweden has developed a high-tech capitalist system that provides extensive welfare benefits to its people. As a result, Sweden has one of the highest standards of living in the world. But these benefits don't come cheaply. The government collects high taxes from its people and industries to pay for them. One of the industries that gives the Swedish government some of this much-needed tax money is forestry. About 65% of Sweden is covered by forest. It has so much wood that the timber industry can supply all of Sweden's needs and have enough left over to make forestry products one of Sweden's top exports. Because the country has been so stable and successful for so long, it hasn't needed to overexploit its natural resources to earn money. Unlike many other timber-producing countries, Sweden works hard to make sure its logging industry cuts down trees responsibly. Even 100 years ago, the government passed strict rules to make sure that too much of the forest was not cut down. Today, the forestry industry actually plants more trees than it cuts down. The Swedes see their forests as much more than a way to earn money. Sweden was the first country in all of Europe to create a national parks system back in 1909. The Swedes celebrate many nature-related festivals and holidays. And they participate in outdoor sports and activities all year round. The government even created a national hiking fitness test back in the 1930s. By the 1970s, hiking was so popular that more than 3 million Swedes had passed this voluntary timed test, just for the fun of it. The natural environment has always been important to the Swedish way of life. And the Swedes are trying to make sure they'll be able to keep it that way for generations to come.
Eastern Europe consists of the following countries: Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Belarus, Poland, the Czech Republic, Slovakia, Ukraine, Slovenia, Hungary, Romania, Moldova, Croatia, Bosnia-Herzegovina, Serbia and Montenegro, Albania, Macedonia, Bulgaria, and Russia. Russia's area of 6,592,800 square miles makes it the world's largest country. Although each country is unique, all share a historic similarity. Each spent a period of recent history under the control of another country, either the former Soviet Union or Yugoslavia. The country of Poland lies at the physical center of the European continent. Throughout history, it was an important trade route between East and West. But because of its location, Poland was often the front line in conflicts. Its borders have changed many times. From 1945 until 1989, Poland was controlled by the Soviet Union. When Soviet authority collapsed, Poland became independent and established a democratic government. Poland, like the rest of the countries in Eastern Europe, began to rebuild its economy with social and economic reforms. The capital of Poland, Warsaw, was nearly destroyed during World War II. Poles have rebuilt their city, and today its skyline is dotted with modern buildings. Krakow, the third largest city in Poland, didn't experience the destruction of war, and its grand historic architecture is well known. Today, optimism about the future of Eastern Europe is evident in the resilient people of this region.
Austria, slightly smaller than Maine, is located in south-central Europe. It is bordered by Switzerland and Liechtenstein to the west, Germany and the Czech Republic to the north, Italy and Slovenia to the south, and Slovakia and Hungary to the east. Most of Austria's 8 million citizens speak German. The capital of Austria is Vienna. Hungary is bordered by Austria and Croatia to the west, the Ukraine to the north, Romania to the east, and Serbia and Montenegro to the south. The capital of Hungary is Budapest, located along the Danube River. Most of the 10 million people who populate Hungary speak Hungarian. Austria is a small, landlocked nation. Mountains and forests make up most of its landscape, and it also has many lakes, among them Lake Constance in the west and Neusiedler Lake in the east. The Habsburg dynasty ruled Austria from 1278 to 1918. These rulers built many of the ornate buildings that stand in Vienna today. Vienna has long been a musical city. Beginning in the 17th century, Vienna became famous for the waltz, a ballroom dance. But many familiar waltz melodies came from yodeling, a type of singing in the Alpine region of Austria. The waltz became popular across Europe and in the United States. Haydn, Mozart, Beethoven, and Schubert lived in Vienna, where they composed their well-known classical works. The Vienna Boys Choir may be more historic than the waltz. It was founded in 1498. Today, almost 250 children live, study, and rehearse in the Augarten Palais, a school in a Baroque palace. At the age of 10, the most talented boys are selected to join the choir. In addition to singing in Vienna on Sundays, the ensemble performs throughout the world. In Vienna, the old lives in harmony with the new. Tourism in this historically rich musical city is a big industry. In fact, the number of visitors Vienna receives each year is higher than its population. The Czech Republic is a landlocked country in Central Europe. It is bordered by Poland to the north and northeast, Slovakia to the east, Austria to the south, and Germany to the west and northwest. Home to more than 10 million, the official language of the Czech Republic is Czech. The Czech Republic and Slovakia once formed Czechoslovakia. The Communist Party of Czechoslovakia controlled the government until 1989, when Soviet authority collapsed. The Czech Republic separated from Slovakia in 1993 to become an independent country once again. Prague is the capital of the Czech Republic. It is one of Europe's most beautiful cities, reflecting urban life dating back more than 1,000 years. Prague's beautiful buildings, built during Europe's medieval, Renaissance, and Baroque periods, are well preserved, largely because they were spared bombing destruction during World War II. Its old section is an architectural treasure, a maze of cobbled lanes, ancient courtyards, winding passages, and churches. Watching over the city is the 1,100-year-old Prague Castle, known as Pražský hrad, or just Hrad to the Czechs. It is one of the largest medieval castles in the world, and it is the most popular tourist attraction in Prague. Next to the castle stands the Gothic Cathedral of St. Vitus, which began construction in 1344 under the rule of Charles IV. This king built the Charles Bridge as well as other Prague landmarks. Renowned for its historic buildings, bridges, and museums, Prague is a top European travel destination and a busy center for Czech industry. No doubt it will remain important to the economy of the Czech Republic. The Czech Republic was invited to join the European Union, or EU, the international organization comprising most Western European countries. The Czech Republic voted to join the EU in 2004. Belarus, Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia are countries in Eastern Europe. All four countries share a common history. Each was once part of the former Soviet Union. At the conclusion of the First World War, the country of Belarus was divided between Poland and Russia. When the USSR, or the Soviet Union, was formed in 1922, Belarus became a founding republic. Then, in 1940, Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia were forcibly occupied and formally incorporated into the Soviet Union as republics. With Lithuania leading the way, all four countries re-emerged as independent states in 1991, after the collapse of Soviet authority. Vilnius is its capital city. Minsk is the capital of Belarus, Latvia's capital is Riga, and Estonia's is Tallinn. In each of these countries, people speak Russian, but each country has its own language too, maintained even through the 50 years of Soviet rule. During the Middle Ages, Lithuania was a large and powerful kingdom. Its many rivers made it an important location on the trade route between Western Europe and Russia. Wealthy merchants built castles on the banks of the Neman River. The country's oldest city, Klaipėda on the Baltic Sea, is one of Eastern Europe's major ports. Most Lithuanians live in cities, but they enjoy outdoor activities during every season. The primary religion in Lithuania is Catholicism. The tradition of planting crosses on this hilltop may have begun in the 14th century. Under Soviet rule, the Russians bulldozed the crosses at least 3 times to demonstrate their control over the Lithuanians. But every time, people replanted the crosses, demonstrating their quiet but willful rejection of Soviet authority. As in other Eastern European countries, the people in Lithuania are proud to live in independent states. As they work to modernize their economies, they continue to express their heritage and traditional customs.
The Balkan Peninsula is the easternmost of Europe's 3 peninsulas. The Balkan countries include the countries of Slovenia, Croatia, Bosnia-Herzegovina, Serbia and Montenegro, Macedonia, Albania, Bulgaria, Romania, and Moldova. Throughout history, the Balkan Peninsula has been a crossroads of Europe and Asia, equally influenced by each. The word Balkan is Turkish for mountain, which makes a lot of sense. The mountainous terrain in the west, the Dinaric Alps, extends along the Adriatic coast. And in the south, the Balkan and Rhodope mountain ranges stretch east-west across Bulgaria. The Julian Alps and the Carpathian Mountains line the Balkans in the north through Romania. Romania is home to historic medieval towns and majestic castles. Many visitors are drawn to Bran Castle, also known as Dracula's Castle. Dracula, the novel written by Bram Stoker in 1897, is based on the reign of a terrible prince, Vlad Tepes, who ruled Wallachia, now present-day Romania, during the mid-15th century. The prince was a harsh and unforgiving ruler of the land, known for his cruelty. Tepes ruthlessly punished those who crossed him, often executing them in public. While there are no direct links between Bran Castle and the cruelties of the prince, it is believed that Stoker located his story at this site. In his book, Dracula was a vampire. The tale of the vampire, a living, blood-sucking corpse, is primarily a Slavic and Hungarian legend that began around 1730. Many believe that the tales of the evil prince evolved into the Balkan Peninsula story of the vampire, told and retold throughout history. The region's mountainous terrain, dense forest, and imposing castles may have inspired this lasting legend.
Spanning the continents of Europe and Asia, the Russian Federation is bordered by Norway, Finland, Estonia, Latvia, Belarus, Ukraine, Georgia, Azerbaijan, Kazakhstan, Mongolia, and China. At nearly twice the size of the United States, it's the largest country on the planet. Russia is so big, it covers 11 time zones. Russia used to lead a collection of communist countries that included many of its current neighbors. This collection was called the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, or USSR. The city of Moscow was the capital of the USSR and the ultimate symbol of communist power. But after struggling with economic and political problems for years, the USSR collapsed in 1991. Moscow became the capital city of the newborn Russian Federation. Today, Moscow leads the rest of Russia in population, industry, culture, science, and education. Under communism, the factories and machines that produced the country's goods were owned by the government. The government decided what and how much of everything was produced. But the leaders of the new Russian Federation adopted a democratic political system and a market economy. A market economy is not controlled by a central authority. Capitalism works on a market economy. The Russian people are now allowed to own some businesses and are free to produce and buy and sell what they want. But change has been slow in Russia. The Russian Federation still depends largely on selling off its natural resources to make money. 80% of Russian exports are oil, natural gas, metals, and timber. And Russia still relies on the same outdated machinery and work practices that they have used for decades. But 1991 did bring some major changes. Western businesses have now come to Russia. The urban landscape has been transformed. New hotels, banks, and other businesses have been drawn to Russia now that the country is open to private investment. Russians can now buy many of the things people in the West take for granted. The religious landscape has changed as well. Under communism, religion was discouraged. But now people can express their beliefs more freely, and religion is becoming more widespread. Today, Russia has about 60 million members of the Russian Orthodox Church, as well as followers of Islam, Buddhism, Judaism, and other religions. More changes are likely if Russia can keep up its recent economic growth and political reforms. But for now, the most important things to the new Russia are the same things that were important to the old one. Its workers, its factories, and its traditions.
The country of Poland was founded more than 1,000 years ago. Poland's size has changed many times, but today the country, which is only slightly smaller than the state of New Mexico, is bordered by Germany, the Baltic Sea, Lithuania, Belarus, Ukraine, Russia, the Czech Republic, and Slovakia. The country was a home to different ethnic groups for hundreds of years, including Germans and Jews from across Europe. Jews first arrived in Poland in the 13th century because they were being treated unfairly in some Western European countries. Here they had the right to practice their religion, own property, and make their own laws. Over time, more Jews left Western Europe to live in Poland. Jewish people were a minority, or a small group, in Poland. Many lived in small villages called shtetls. Farmers, business people, and professionals lived and worked in Poland's shtetls and prayed in the village synagogues. But on September 1st, 1939, Nazi soldiers from Germany brought life in the shtetls to a quick and violent end. The Nazis wanted to kill people that they considered racially inferior. They targeted Slavs, mentally ill people, and especially Jews. When the Nazis invaded Poland, they forced Polish Jews to leave their homes and live in small neighborhoods called ghettos, away from other Polish people. The Jews lived in the ghettos until Hitler's Nazi soldiers sent them to die in concentration camps. In some ghettos, people fought against the Nazis. Members of the Jewish Fighting Organization in Warsaw tried for 4 weeks to protect themselves from being sent to concentration camps. The battle that became known as the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising was one of the few open rebellions against the Nazis in Europe. The rebels fought bravely, but the Nazis defeated them. 7,000 Jewish rebels were killed, and 15,000 were taken to concentration camps and killed along with millions more. By the end of World War II, the shtetls were long gone. But today, there are survivors who still call Poland their home. Poland's Jewish population has survived for hundreds of years. Even though their community is very small now, these people remember the horrors of the past and live for the hopes of the future. Ukraine is one of the largest countries in Eastern Europe, yet the entire country is slightly smaller than the state of Texas. It shares borders with Poland, Slovakia, Hungary, Romania, Moldova, Belarus, Russia, and both the Black Sea and the Sea of Azov to the south. Even though people have lived in the Ukraine since the time of the Greeks and Romans, the country just became independent in 1991. Before 1991, this country was a part of the former Soviet Union. People around the world called the Ukraine the breadbasket of the Soviet Union because of its rich farmland. This country's meat, milk, grain, and vegetables have long been sold throughout Eastern Europe and Russia. Though many Ukrainians live in the countryside and work in the agricultural industry, more than half of the Ukraine's 48 million people live in its cities. This includes Ukrainians, Russians, and people of many other Eastern European ethnicities. Many Ukrainians have jobs in the country's banks, restaurants, factories, and farms, but roughly 1/3 of the nation's people live in poverty. And many of the Ukraine's industries are in desperate need of modernization. On April 26, 1986, the aging Chernobyl nuclear power plant exploded. particles of radioactive dust spread over northern Ukraine and its neighboring countries. The radiation contaminated everything near the reactor. Anyone who ate vegetables, meat, or dairy products from that area risked becoming sick or dying. Some of Ukraine's farms remain too radioactive to grow food safely, so farmers must grow grain and raise animals on contaminated soil or on the limited supply of land that has not been contaminated. Ukrainians are rebuilding their country, but the process takes a lot of time. Many people are not able to afford treatment for the effects of Chernobyl's radiation. And doctors expect that thousands of Ukrainians will develop cancer because of radiation. But Ukrainians are doing their best to put Chernobyl behind. Ukrainians are not living in the past. They are using their agricultural wealth and medical technology to make their country a better place to live.
Serbia and Montenegro is located in southeastern Europe. It is bordered by Albania, Bosnia-Herzegovina, Bulgaria, Croatia, Hungary, the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia, and Romania. Serbia and Montenegro used to be part of a much larger collection of republics called Yugoslavia. In the early 1990s, Yugoslavia unraveled along ethnic lines, and most of its republics split off and became independent countries. Kosovo, a province within the Republic of Serbia, tried to break away as well. The ethnic Albanian majority in Kosovo wanted to escape the increasingly brutal rule of the Serbs, who were now the most powerful republic in Yugoslavia. But the Serbs wouldn't let Kosovo go. Years of guerrilla war followed. Thousands died, and thousands of ethnic Albanians were driven from their homes. Following a NATO bombing campaign on Serb troops, United Nations peacekeepers moved into Kosovo in June 1999. They've been there ever since. But the war had left behind an invisible killer. Landmines and unexploded bombs. Both sides laid thousands of landmines. And years of fighting left unexploded bombs and ammunition scattered throughout the region. Though the fighting was over, people still suffered from the war.
So Robbie and the dog handler, if you can make your
But now Kosovo is slowly becoming a safer place, as workers have begun clearing the landmines left behind from the war.
I've never been in a minefield as dense as this one, personally. I've worked in Cambodia, Kuwait, Mozambique, a few other smaller countries in Africa, and never, ever the density of mines that I've found here.
These teams of UN-sponsored landmine removers are doing the dangerous and time-consuming work of finding and eliminating the hidden landmines. In their first year, the deminers cleared nearly half the mines and unexploded bombs in Kosovo. And injuries from mines have been cut in half. They still have work to do, but the deminers have already cleared many areas near farms and schools. With these areas cleared, the people are now returning to their villages and are beginning to rebuild their homes, schools, hospitals, and their lives.
The really, really good feelings I actually get is once we've completed an area, is actually going back there and seeing it being used. You've seen these people staying away, they can't grow their crops, they just can't access the ground. And then you've cleared it, you've gone in there and you'll see villages grow, you'll see life come back into villages. That's the good feeling I get.